Okay. So thank you for a couple of you here, a few of you on Zoom for being at our special magical weekends. We miss those of you who were not able to be with us. So one of our guests who joins us for Rosh Hashanah, who's our chazan, AJ Esral, he sent me right after Shabbos a 10-minute TED Talk about the power of attention. You have to watch this guy who he was trying to give over that it's all depending on where your attention is. Like everything that Michael did and all that, everything was all because he was somehow directing our attention somewhere else. And this TED Talk, I like had to rewind it and rewind it. I'm like, where, what? Like he's talking about the power of attention while he's also performing his mentalist magic, however you want to call it. And then he ends this 10-minute TED Talk by saying, isn't it crazy if we had someone's attention, what would we do with it? It was like such a grab, like you think like it's amazing, but think about how our attention, all it takes is 1 second to, he got off somebody's watch. Like nobody's watching that he had his watch. It was the same thing that on the TED Talk that the guy did as well. Like no one's watching that he slid his watch off of his wrist. Had us focusing on something totally different that somehow by the end of the thing, he had his watch in his hand. So anyways, it just got me thinking about attention and how easily distracted, I guess, as humans we are. And how when we can focus on it, even when we think we are so focused, like you can still miss things. It's like unbelievable. So anyways, it was really a wonderful weekend and we're so grateful. Baruch Hashem. I pinched somebody on Friday night or Saturday night maybe, and I was like, can you believe we just met him 6 weeks ago in Israel? And like, look at this. Like, look what we pulled off just 6 weeks later. It was pretty amazing. Thank God. So I'm very excited. We're going to continue now with our Strive for Truth. I was trying to see how many like parts we'll have to do to this giving and taking, and it might take some time to work it through. And something so fun. I was telling my father that I'm teaching this now. This is the first time I'm teaching this book, Strive for Truth. And he got so excited and he said, that's one of my favorite things to teach about. And I loved it. And so many people told me that it changed their lives when I taught it. I was getting all excited. And then he went back in the 1980s, guys. I was either not born or I was a baby. And he pulled up, he had all of his recordings on cassettes. He had them all transferred over into digital forms. And he was able to send me his recordings from the 1980s. First of all, I sent him a text back. I said, I think this is phenomenal beyond what I could even explain. And he's like, I don't understand. Like, you've heard me teach. I'm like, we're in such different stages. Like just hearing you teach back then, it was just phenomenal. So anyways, that's been really fun for me because I'm getting to hear my father's classes on this and I get to teach it, and it's just been very special. So he took a very long time going through it, and we'll see how long it's going to take. So I think that just in order to, especially because there are some new faces, there's just a couple things that I just want to reintroduce. This is what we call the Kuntras HaChesed, the chapter on kindness. We are in the middle of discussing giving and taking. We established that giving and taking is either evil or good. There's no middle ground between giving and taking. It's coming from an all evil place or it's coming from an all good place. We established that giving and taking is I guess you could call it like meta principle, like the goal, the ultimate foundation of all midot, of all character traits, kind of come from either being a giver or a taker. We established that being a taker is different than being a receiver, right? We said that being a receiver is kind of like the good part of being a taker. And we also said that what we're really trying to do when we get to the root of being a giver is we're trying to connect with the divine inside of us. There's ways to be a giver that we kind of feel like it feels good to be a giver. And what we're trying to do in an ideal state would be getting to even a higher level, which means that I'm really just trying to tap into that part of the divine inside of me, which is the highest level of giving. So that was really that. Oh, one more thing. We established that when a child becomes either a bar or a bat mitzvah, I often teach my bat mitzvah girls this, like that's kind of when this extra soul, like a new level of soul, a new level of consciousness enters into them. And that is kind of when they start making decisions for themselves, they start determining things for themselves. And I learned something so interesting actually from Rabbi Dessler, is that when they can act, part of that is that they can start to become either true givers or true takers. And what I learned, and I think this was actually my father who had said this, is that a lot of that has to do with, because that is the age where like sexual desire almost clicks in, and they start realizing that there's something else that they can give to, and they're also going to want to be receivers of it. And so that's the age where it really like starts to click. It all comes together. So I just thought that was like an interesting perspective as well. We ended last week, which wasn't really last week, we ended last topic with a question, which was, does giving lead to loving, or does loving lead to giving? That was the question that we kind of left with. When I love somebody, do I give to them? Is it an automatic thing that I'm going to love and therefore I give? Or do I give in order to develop love? And I think that we ended with a conclusion, but now we're gonna kind of dive in over here. And there were so many pieces over here that I wanted to go through that I decided it might be nice to just read kind of some paragraph by paragraph and break it down and discuss it. So over here, we're going to start. It's called, if you happen to have this book, which I told you not to get this book, so hopefully you don't have this book. But if you happen to have the book, we are on page 126. And it's called On the Roots of Love. So I'm just going to read paragraph by paragraph, and we'll break it down like that. There's nobody in the whole world who does not possess at least a spark of the faculty of giving. This may be seen, for instance, at times of family rejoicing, when people of the most grasping natures still feel the urge to involve their friends in their celebration. No one's joy is complete unless he can share it with others. Similarly, everyone has a deep-seated need for social life of some sort. This is why, this is how we started class today. This is why solitary confinement, separation from the company of one's fellow men, is considered such a severe punishment. Isn't that what Nancy said? That was like the worst punishment ever, COVID. What is the nature of these yearnings? And he answers by saying that all of this comes from sparks of the faculty of giving. It's all coming from a place that ultimately we want one thing, and we want one thing only. At our core, we want to be givers. We all want to have children. Two motives can be distinguished over here. We want children to give us a sense of continuity. We feel that death is not quite so final if we have left children behind us. But perhaps an even stronger motive is the need to have someone on whom to lavish our love and affection. This is why you can find that childless couples will often adopt orphan children and bring them up as their own. Some will even lavish their affection on a dog or other small pet and treat it almost like a child. This too is an indication of the hidden depths of the power of giving in the human soul. So this is a very interesting point, meaning oftentimes I've seen people getting pets and they think that they're getting them because the pet is filling their need. I think, I don't know, as I'm getting older, or maybe as my children are getting older, I am becoming more and more of a dog lover. There's some dogs are just very, very cute. And I see how, you really can become so connected to a pet to the point that it becomes your comfort. It's somebody that I know, I just went to go visit, and she said that her husband's anxiety almost completely went away once they got their dog. So you might think of it as it's a need. There's something there that's filling your need. What he's bringing up over here is that getting a pet actually stems from a place of having something to give. It's still coming from the root of being a giver. It's more of the act of giving to it. You happen to receive back, but it's from the act of wanting to give that desire even stems. And that's an amazing thing. It's an amazing concept. So here he says, here we come to an interesting question. We see that love and giving always come together. This is what we started discussing last week. Is the giving a consequence of the love, or is it perhaps that the reverse is true? Is the love a result of the giving? Now, if you ask this question to a younger child, what do you think that they would tell you?
The opposite.
They would tell you, you love something, so of course you give to it.
I thought you were saying like, I love grandpa because he gives me ice cream or something.
Oh, okay, that you love somebody because they give to you. But how would you, that's for sure true, but how would you ask them, let's say a 9-year-old, how would you, if you ask a 9-year-old, is it which one comes first? What do you think they're gonna say? Yeah, you love something first, so you're gonna give it. They're not gonna be mature enough to be able to say, if I give, I can love, right? But as we get older, we start to understand over here exactly this idea that Rabbi Dessler is really trying to rewire our brains to. And he says that we usually think that it's love which causes giving, because we observe that a person showers gifts and favors on the ones that he loves. But there's another side to the argument. Giving may bring about love for the same reason that a person loves what he himself has created or nurtured. He recognizes that it is a part of himself. So now he starts introducing, let me read two more sentences here. Whether it's a child that he has brought into the world, an animal he has reared, a plant that he has tended, or even a thing that he has made, or a house that he has built, a person is bound in love to the works of his hands, for in it he finds himself. So what does this mean? What does this mean? What is this trying to tell us?
Well, an infant is often used as an example of a newborn comes around, they're not giving us anything. We're feeding, we're taking care.
Right.
You just love them more and more.
Right.
Just from giving.
Just from giving. And then I think we said that 2 weeks ago. And then I asked, and what happens when that little infant baby starts to become a teenager and has a voice and has. Rachel, I didn't see what you said. I see that you sent a thing, but I didn't see it. Is it an important? Do I need to answer this question?
No.
What?
I'm just being silly. What I said was, do I get do I get credit for being on Zoom today because I had to give attention to my doggy in the middle of the night, which is true. Anyway, we digress.
Oh, little doggy giving. Yes, you
Yeah,
do
a little
get credit
doggy
for being
giving.
on
Anyway,
Zoom.
I apologize. Pardon
No,
me.
it's okay. It is. So then we asked the question of what happens. So we started establishing this last week. The example that Debbie is talking about is the biggest way that God gives us the ability to be able to see ourselves in something else by giving us, let's say, a child in which we receive zilch back, right? I mean, after a while, you start to feel that thing of like that nurture, that connection, but like really, you're not getting anything back other than that feeling. But then that child starts to grow up, and then that child starts to have a voice and opinions. And oftentimes those opinions are not the same as our opinions. And oftentimes there's this clash. And the question is, you still need to be able to love this individual. So where does that fall into this? So according to Rabbi Dessler, you keep pouring in the giving. You continue to give, you continue to give, you continue to give, because the more that you can give, the more you will love. Sometimes people have it backwards and they think this relationship is not working for me. And I'm not talking about anything that falls into the range of any sort of abusive relationship, but they feel like this is not really, I don't feel like pouring into this marriage. I'm not receiving anything from this. This is just not worth it for me. Where they don't realize that if the only thing that they would do would be pour in more into the marriage, they would receive plenty back. It's oftentimes that lack of the awareness, and the same thing with a child, the same thing, So that is such an important thing. So, and I love this line that he says, because oftentimes in the giving is where we find ourselves. Anytime. And like, there's like too many contraptions going on here. It's my mom. No, mom. Nope.
Doesn't she know your teacher?
No, she doesn't know my schedule. But okay. So I don't think it's gonna go off and so.
Over now, there's like something blocking your screen a little bit.
No.
Sorry.
This is a new feature. This is also why I'm a little bit. This is a new feature. Does my face look lighter to you or no? I have a little light that I got because I noticed that in all the recordings it looked very dark. Oh. So I got a light to go onto my screen, but now it should be better now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. I have been shown a source in the sayings of our rabbis, which may indicate that they held the opinion we have just put forward, which is that love flows in the direction of giving. They say in the tractate of Derech Eretz Zuta, which is in the Mishnah, if you want to keep close to the love of your friend, make it your concern to seek his welfare. Now, welfare, this is where we're gonna discover a little bit more about really what it means to become a giver, because really what we're introducing over here to the forefront of our minds is the concept of any relationship that this is such a great relationship principle. Any relationship that we want to care about, that we want to feel like is growing, is blossoming, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, how much am I pouring into this relationship? Am I pouring in enough that I feel like I am a giver? Or is there maybe something that I can be doing more? And we're going to get there, but it's very important to recognize that the giving that we pour in has to be customized giving. Because if we are giving in a way that feels good to me, if I give in a way that feels good to me and does not feel good to the receiver, is that even considered giving? And the answer is no.
That's like the love
It's
language.
very much like the love
Yeah,
languages.
because you
It's
give
very
what you
much like
want,
the love
that may not
languages.
be what the
Exactly.
other person wants or needs.
Exactly. Very much. Yes, Rane.
Did you see my comment? I was thinking along the lines is like an arranged marriage, a shidduch. In the beginning, you're giving, giving, giving until that love flows in and you form the love between the two.
That's so interesting. Why do you specifically say within an arranged marriage?
Because the shidduch is sometimes what, 6 weeks and they get married. You're gonna say there's love? No, you arrange that you have maybe certain similar ideas or thoughts that you want to work on together for a life together, but there's no love. You don't how 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is. It forms later on. You're giving to each other and giving to each other in the relationship, and the love grows.
I hear what you're saying. Yes, I would have to agree. I would definitely have to agree with that.
Because you and Shlomo dated short, right?
We dated very short, and for me, it
Well-
felt like a long engagement, but guys, it was like a whole 4 months. So like that felt like so long to me, but it was 4 months, and we dated very, very short. We dated less than 2 weeks. So to Rane's point, I would say exactly that is correct. It is very hard. Well, this is on recording, so nobody posts this anywhere, but I remember the first time that I actually said the words that I love you, and it was not in the very beginning of our relationship. It would have been impossible to have felt that sense of love after knowing each other for 10 days. You could say it, but it's not a very true statement. It's just not.
Right.
And I remember very vividly, and it was after a certain amount of time that you feel like you're pouring enough into the relationship that you can finally say those words and they can actually mean something, you know?
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, very well said. So yes. Okay. So let's go a little bit deeper now. Love of this kind can go very deep. Let us observe what is written in God's Torah. And he writes in parentheses, this is the only source from which we can learn true depths of the human heart, for only the Creator knows the secrets of the human soul that he created. I love that line. See, if I wasn't reading to you from the book, that would have gotten totally washed over.
Can you read that again?
Yeah, he says, but let us observe what we see in the Torah. And then he writes in parentheses, this is the only source from which we can learn the true depths of the human heart, for only the Creator knows the secrets of the human soul that he created. Like the one who created the people, who created the Torah, is the only way that he can know it. I'm in the middle of teaching a few brides right now, and I every time that I teach all the laws, I'm always sitting. It doesn't get old. I'm always like, how did they know all of this about human psychology? Like, how did they know that our brains and our hearts and our bodies were wired in this way? Like, because it comes from the Creator himself. Of course, that's how. So it's fascinating. Okay, so I love that line. We find there among the categories, this is very interesting. We find there among the categories of men who were permitted to return home before a battle were the following. So we know that in the Torah, we actually learned this together in our Torah of Torah. There are certain exemptions from a man going out to fight. And in it, it tells us the following, and he quotes, whoever has built a new house and has not consecrated it, ... And whoever has planted a vineyard and has not redeemed it, ... And whoever has wedded a woman and has not taken her to his home, ... What Rabbi Dessler then goes on to explain is that all these categories are treated in the exact same way. They are all exempt from starting battle. Okay, the builder of the house, the planter of the vineyard, and the man who's just about to get married. The Torah thus reveals to us that the love we bear to the fruits of our labor is directly comparable with the love of a man for his betrothed. There can be no doubt that this is an example of the love produced by the power of giving. So it's like he's equating the same thing as the love that's poured into the vineyard, the love that is poured into, or the effort that's poured into building a new house or a new home, is all the same if a man takes a wife. And he's making that comparison. There's different analogies about why these specific things, but he's saying that it's coming from a place of equating all of these things to show that it's all coming from a place of pouring in and then having to take a step back and be a receiver, loving and pouring in, doing, and then becoming a receiver and feeling that love. Okay. Okay. I'm going to skip this. He gives an example of, it was actually a very sad example, and I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you think. He gives an example then of during a wartime, where a couple who had one child and they were very sadly separated, and the child ended up with the father, and the mother all those years was not taking care of her child. And after X amount of years, they were reunited, and he describes it as a very sad situation where the mother did not have the same love of this child that the father had because of all those years where she didn't pour into this child in the same way. So it's like, I don't know. Before I say my opinion on it, I'm curious to hear any thoughts about that. He gives that kind of as like a support in his case, that like, you see that because the mother didn't pour in through all those years, the love was less than the father had. I'm just curious to hear if anybody has any thoughts about that.
When you hear of women who've been separated from their children who had to be adopted or whatever, I don't think I heard that.
Right. So that's what I also felt. That's what I
agree.
also felt. And I'll tell you why. And I wonder, he doesn't go on to explain this example anymore, but I wonder can you give to somebody? I think I know the answer, but do you think you can give to somebody through your mind?
Yeah, you know what? Sorry, I'm thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alyssa from last week. You know, she's been separated from Sam since he died,
Mhm.
Right.
but if she were allowed to be with him, she's loved him all this time. And I think everything she's ever done since then has been for him.
Correct.
She has been pouring her love into him.
Correct. So that's why I think in a way he doesn't give enough, there's not enough support for this case, because I feel like you could take the exact same circumstance and say that it's not the same. In this case, I would have to fill in between the lines and understand that it was like an out of mind, out of sight, like she disconnected from this child. It has to be that type of circumstance. Exactly. Like a despondent, or because there are ways where one can think, pray,
Think of
do
the
acts.
hostage mothers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
the love can
interact.
become
Yeah.
even
Love
more.
is so
And all
great.
these women, I know there's a lot of women who come over here as nannies and domestic
Right.
help or whatever, and they had to leave their children in
That's
their
right.
country.
That's right.
They don't love their children any less just because they can't see them. They're over here making money to send it over to them.
Right. So I am putting in an asterisk into this story, because the way that it's described is that because she had to part from him as such a small boy, and then kind of stumbled upon him when he was grown up and felt this major disconnection, only could be because in her mind she had already disconnected. Otherwise, it's not. I mean,
Right.
the hostage
These other
mother is a great
examples
example.
are Others of people that are giving, though. Those nannies are giving. They're working hard to send.
Yeah, but not to the same, but for different children.
But they're not able to
They're
be
working hard to send their own children.
Right, they're not able to spend.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
you're saying they're still giving in
they're
that
giving
way.
To their
Right.
own children. The
Right.
hostage mothers are praying and thinking all the time. this mother was.
There clearly has to have been a disconnect. Exactly. It
I
has to be.
really think somebody like this, maybe it was too painful for her to think about her child who was separated, maybe for that reason. But it's just unfathomable.
Right. I just wish that
Maybe
he
it's
would
just
say
like-
that line there.
As learned as this guy must be, he obviously was very learned, but he's a man. And I think there's gotta be.
There's, I just feel like it's missing that. That's why, when I read it, I was like, something is missing over here but I could see why if somebody makes that complete shift in their minds and it's like done and they're not doing anything and then suddenly they're reunited with their child. That could
Mothers
feel,
that
yes,
give up their
exactly.
Babies at adoption though, and make a point of
Right, to
Not-
protect
to
themselves, right?
protect themselves, but they're not thinking about it, so they're not. So he has a point.
Yeah, I think that was his point. I think that it had to have been that there was like a despondency or something that was like a lack. Okay, here comes another very interesting example from the Torah. I actually love this example. He says that and maybe you know this halacha, maybe you know this law. There are two laws about loading up animals. Okay, so maybe it doesn't apply so much to us because we have our very comfortable cars. But what he says is that two cases are discussed. He says one is the case of a packed animal whose load has fallen, and the mitzvah is to help the owner reload the animal. Okay, so you have the donkey, it's all filled up with all of its stuff. The load falls off. You happen to be walking back. You have a mitzvah to help this owner load up his donkey again. You'll see that you kind of could use a car as the point of it, but either way, for one specific reason, it's about the animal. The other one is the case of an overloaded animal. However, it's twofold. The mitzvah has two pieces because one of them is that it's actually burdening the animal. The animal is actually overburdened. And so therefore, the mitzvah over there is to prevent further suffering to the animal and to help the owner load it more efficiently. So that case would be very similar, except that it doesn't fall off. You're walking by the donkey. It looks like this animal is struggling. It has too much on its back. So you turn to the owner and you say, ooh, it looks like your animal is struggling. I'm going to help you. Let's figure out a way to make this burden a little bit less on this donkey. Okay, so now you have two mitzvot because you're not just helping the owner reload because it fell, but you're actually helping. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, which is called being careful of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, which means causing any sort of pain to any animal. We are not allowed to do. So over here, helping alleviate that pain is the double mitzvah. However, the question arises, what if one is confronted by two donkeys? And you have those two situations, which one do you help first? So he says the second example takes precedence. Why? Because if you have the additional mitzvah to help the animal, you're getting two for the price of one. If one is confronted by two precisely similar cases, but this is really the crux of what he's saying. But now, in this instance, the owner of the donkey or the animal is an enemy. Which one takes precedence?
It doesn't matter, does it?
It's gonna matter. That's his whole point. The halacha is going to be different. So now you have the same cases. You have the same thing. One where the donkey's overloaded, one where the thing fell. Except, however, you're looking at two individuals. You're looking at two owners. One of them is your enemy and one of them is your friend. Which one do you help?
Where the animals hurt, where the animal.
Okay, but let's say they're both hurt. You have identical situations. You're right. Thank you.
Enemy.
The
I think
enemy.
This question, I mean, obviously, we would.
Fella's like, I am smart. Obviously, we would want to help our friend.
Can't be the answer.
Exactly, exactly. So
Yeah,
as
exactly.
Tammy and Rane said, exactly. So the halacha actually says that you help your enemy first. That's really the
Right.
crux of where he's trying to get to after all these details, okay? Yes, of course, and it has to do with this power of being a giver. because what he says is the enemy takes precedence since there is a specific mitzvah to help one's enemy so as to conquer one's yetzer. Okay, so now we have to stop reading for 1 second and understand what he's talking about over here. What is the yetzer?
Your evil.
The yetzer is the desire that oftentimes, well, yetzer technically just means desire, but we have the yetzer hara, which is the evil
Okay.
inclination, and we have the yetzer hatov. If giving and taking, if giving and taking are the root of all character development and all character growth, then we have to understand that in the way that we develop it is helping us channel and change literally the channels of our desires. Meaning the automatic desire is, go help your friend. Go help your friend, of course. That's what I want to do. But the halacha actually says, no, stretch yourself. Go help the person that is not your friend. Go develop those muscles and be the assistance for the one that is considered your enemy. And over here, we understand something so interesting in the power of giving. The Torah is trying to tell us over here, if he's your enemy, then give. If he's your enemy and you have these two cases, of course, it's easier for you to give to your friend. But however, if you make the right choice and you try to give to the person that is not your friend, maybe the channels will then change and you will end up becoming a friend of your enemy. Yeah.
Right.
Or-
So there's a difference between an enemy and a non-friend.
So he calls it an enemy. The Torah calls it an enemy. I think obviously if this person is of danger to you, the
Yeah.
category would be different. Okay. If a person all the time the Torah teaches us, if somebody can hurt you, your life becomes first. Okay. So anytime you're talking about any form of like an enemy that your life is at danger or in danger, you're exempt. We're talking, he refers to it as an enemy. We're talking about somebody that we don't like,
Okay.
somebody that is a clash, somebody that we do not fall into the category of our friends.
Is
Yeah.
the point to be that then you will turn this enemy into a friend?
So that's what he's suggesting over here. He says that what we learn from this halacha is that we are meant to wire our channels. We're meant to wire our giving in a way that when we learn to give to our enemies and do an act of kindness, do an act of service, it might loosen something up. The tension might be a little bit less.
I don't know, that sounds like Jews trying to assimilate and then nobody likes them no matter what they do. They're different, they're the same. And
Okay, so put it to the category of all Jews, because let's first focus on the Jews
Okay.
amongst us, okay? Because I think we all can say that even within our Jewish brothers and sisters, there are those who we like more and those are those who we dislike more. Let's focus on our family first, and that would be a totally separate section. There probably is halacha around, do you help a Jew or a non-Jew first? This is specifically within the framework of
Okay.
Jews, yeah.
Didn't this come up in last week's Torah Parsha between Jacob and Esau?
When what? Which part?
When they came apart, when they were getting together again, and Jacob sent all of the gifts to Esau first.
Oh, yes, yes, that is a great example. That is a wonderful example, and that was exactly why he did that. From that koach hanasina, from that power of giving. Beautiful job, Gail. Beautiful example. Well said. I had that this morning with one of my children who there was a coat left in my house by a girl who this child was in a fight with this kid. And she kept on trying to use every excuse in the book why she couldn't bring this coat back to school. And she kept saying, it's very awkward for me to watch. She's little. You know who it is at this point. It's very awkward of me to walk into school holding this coat. Okay, I'll put it in a bag. Well, then it's going to be awkward for me to hold the bag. She had 10 excuses why she can't bring this coat back into school. And I know that she's in the middle of one of those day fights. And I said, I have a feeling that if you do this, I said, I'm actually teaching Strive for Truth right now. Let me give you a little bit of a lesson by Rabbi Dessler. And I literally explained this to her. And I said that because you are in a fight with her, the mitzvah becomes even more. Because you have the power to give to her and you're annoyed at her. So she did it, by the way. And I was watching so carefully because she goes, the principal holds open, the head of school holds open the door for them every day. So she goes, he's going to look at me and he's going to wonder why I have a bag. He's going to ask me what's in my bag. That was also part of her excuse. I'm like, and you will tell him you are returning the coat to your friend. Anyways, I'm sitting there in the carpool line. I'm looking at the door so carefully, to see what's going to happen.
Wanting
Sure.
to be on the principal's.
I just wanted to see the exchange because I knew she was feeling, for whatever reason, her little brain this was very awkward for her to show up with this coat. I'm watching so carefully and he goes, "Oh, you look like you're struggling." I'm watching his lips. "Do you need help with your bag?" And I'm like, "Why'd you have to notice the bag? Like, just don't notice the bag." So he helped her like adjust her straps of her backpack so that she has more like weight. She was like struggling with balancing everything. That was also part of her excuse.
Devorah,
Anyways, she did it. The bottom line is we have yet to discuss when she gets home, but she did it. And even for a child to understand that when you can stretch yourself and you can give to that quote unquote enemy, this is her friend who she happens to be in that, today. But like that's something. So this is what we learned. So I thought about this a lot. And I thought about how hard it is. It's so much easier to give to the people that we already love. Of course. And then I have to bring another example from another child. And then you guys can share with me your example. So this example was from Meira, who's in her gap year. My oldest daughter is in her gap year in Israel. I just discovered, she had told me about this teacher in the beginning. You're not going to believe the story. She told me about this teacher in the beginning of the year. She had said, "I often teach my children that if someone annoys you or if you feel a certain kill them with kindness. And like when you can just give kindness, again, giving, you're going to break something down and the barrier is going to come down and you're going to be able to give." So she had said to me, this teacher, she didn't tell me the name. She has a certain teacher. Like this teacher is, for whatever reason, like she just feels a real, like not there. She goes, "She's going to be my kill it with kindness teacher. I'm going to get through to her." Anyways, I came to her school and I was just there and I'm looking at all the names and I look at one of the names and I'm like, that name is so familiar to me. Guess why? She was my teacher in seminary too. And I looked at her and I went, "Kill her with kindness?"
We lost the sound.
There's one with kindness, and I broke through, and she ended up being my very favorite teacher. She doesn't smile. She has a very harsh personality. She's very low energy. Like it's a certain type, but she's brilliant and she has a heart of gold. It just takes a while to get through to it. I could not believe that 20 years later, my daughter is having the same teacher and she's on the same mission.
With the same
With
issue.
the same issue. But okay, that's her personality, whatever it is. She's a brilliant teacher and she gave me over. I have endless gratitude to this teacher for what she gave me, but it took me till close to Purim. I was like more than halfway through the year to really start to feel what she was giving me. So I still cannot believe that it was the same teacher. And it only came because she had said, she didn't even tell me the name. It only came when I saw the name on the door. She told me yesterday, actually, that she's like, "I went to the teacher. I asked her if she remembered you. And she said she definitely does." I was like, she better remember me for the amount that I poured into her. You better remember me. Anyways, a very funny story. But this is such an important reminder that oftentimes when we start to feel like there are people in our lives, I'm sure we can all come up with the lists of the people in our lives that don't even necessarily fall into the category of enemies, but they're just the people who just, it's hard. They annoy you. They get under your skin. When we can ask ourselves, what is it that I can pour into this person for X amount of time, you will start to see that something will begin to change. And the change generally is not because that person has changed. The change is because we have changed. We have learned to be able to pour in. We have learned to be able to give. So therefore, the channel starts to change. That's the power of it. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Yes, Lisa.
So what if so I had texted you too, but
I'm not seeing my text. I'm sorry.
you have two people, like you're riding bikes with a bunch of people. One is your friend and one you don't like, for example, or it's an enemy. And they both fall. You're supposed to help the enemy first.
Isn't that unbelievable? Halachically, you are supposed to help your enemy first.
Okay, so then in another case, so if you help your enemy first because you're making that gesture, and then repeatedly you make the gestures and it's not reciprocated, or that person is not changing. Are you supposed to still, like a family member or someone close to you, try, but you're not getting the results that you are saying you get? What do you do?
Okay, so I think you're asking two different questions. So in terms of continuing to pour, the answer is you never give up. You
Right.
really should you never give up pouring. But I would have to ask an actual question. I would have to ask about that. If you have that type of a person that you're trying to pour into, and nothing is happening, and then they both fall off the bike, which ones you help? That's a separate question. And that really, I have to ask. I don't know what the answer is. But there really is never a time that you are exempt from giving, unless it comes into the category of like abuse. If somebody is starting to take over and you feel like they are verbally abusing you, mentally abusing you, God forbid, physically abusing you, and you are still pouring in, that is a totally different category, and you are not obligated to pour in. But somebody who's a healthy person and you're just not feeling the vibe, you're not really feeling the channel change, continue to pour, continue to pour. It's very rare that you won't start to feel a channel change, but I guess it could happen. It could happen.
So-
Does that answer your question? Hard answer. Okay, yeah.
Is there like too much of pouring it? Like,
So we're going to get to it a little bit more when we start to really discover what, like, he's going to unpack a little bit about like, how do we give and what do we give and at what point, but just on a basis of just like, I think we're all like normal, healthy people. Like, what do you think? When does something become too much?
I mean, I guess it's subjective. I don't, and I'm just thinking boundaries. Like,
Okay, so boundaries is for sure something that he's going to discuss. It's something that he absolutely discusses. But when you are, again, remember, and we're going to get into this more, but when you are coming from a place of always, every time you give, you have to put yourself into their shoes. Remember that giving, ultimate giving, is not coming from a place of this feels good to me, okay? Showing up with a big cake for a diabetic that can't eat the cake is not a kind way of giving, okay? Showing, and you could think of 100 examples, but we somehow do it. Like I somehow do it. Like we somehow forget, because you know why? We're human, and we automatically first register ourselves before we register other people. If we were really pausing and we were slowing down to really think, hold on one second, how can I really give to this person? If you're really thinking, it's not possible that there'd be too much giving, because you're putting yourself into their shoes. You're being aware of the boundaries that they want, and you're thinking about what it would mean to be able to give.
but what about the giving to someone and then how it affects maybe other people in your family?
Okay, that is a very good question.
Like, when you start to compare maybe, or be like, oh, wow, that's a lot of giving to X, and what about us?
Okay, so I think we're going to tackle this as well in a future question, but I think it is in a future chapter, I should say. It is such an important question, because there could be people who are nearest and dearest to us in our homes, and sometimes we're focused on, giving out and giving more to other people outside, and the people who are nearest to us are thinking, wait a second, like, why is all of her attention going to fulfilling that? So for that, I'll just tell you a general rule. This is just a rule of thumb that we see in the Torah. Kindness and giving always starts at home. Always, always, always starts at home. And until your four corners are fully poured into, you have no obligation to start pouring out. It's a whole nother section that we'll get into, but that's a hard pill to swallow. Have I ever told you about my making meals for all of my friends who have had babies and what that has looked like and what I have learned?
No.
I must have. Have I told anybody? Rachel, I for sure. Rachel's nodding. I'm like, I have sure. I was like, no, just in realizing like I'm working so hard to prepare, and we do this all the time. Like I just signed up today for 2 meals this week. Like my friends are having babies, or people in my community are having babies all the time. You always want to give a nice meal. And so I'm much better now, but a few years ago, I realized that I was focusing so much on the dinner for my friends. And somehow when my kids were coming home, there was nothing there. Like, it was like, this is not kind of dinner that we like. What do you mean? And they see this gorgeous packed up dinner for my friends' kids, and they're wondering like, right? Or the time when I'm focusing more on making my cleaning lady a salad, and then my husband walks through the door and he's like, got it, right? Like, where's my salad? So that's a humbling pill to swallow, where you have to realize like the people who are in your, and it's a real work in progress, because it's much easier actually to pour. Trust me, it is so much more satisfying to pack up a delicious supper for my friends and her family, and wrap it all beautifully and in the bow and the whole card, and like then like feed my kids what they want for dinner, and have like, we have this for dinner, like the fetching that comes regardless. Of course. And yet That's my obligation, is to first fill my Dalet Amos, my home, make sure that that is fully. Once we know that those walls are concretized and that everything is poured in, then we can pour to others. That's a whole nother section on giving, but that's also a very humbling pill to swallow because it's much easier to give outside. And it's fair if the people who are near and dear to us could feel resentful when we're giving to others. Obviously, there are certain circumstances, and I think it's hard to say it's so black and white, you know? There are times when, you know, certain people or certain things, certain circumstances come up and we have to pour outside, and sometimes our families will suffer from that. And they have to understand and they have to know that this is what's going on and that's a conversation, yada, yada. But as a general rule, that is something that the Torah teaches us. Okay. What I want to point out over here is that after going on this whole idea that we're talking about the enemies and everything, I'm going to skip a little bit, but he says that the point over here is that by resisting one's inclination and helping one's enemy, one automatically removes some of the hatred from one's own heart and replaces it with the love which will come from giving. And then he ends this paragraph by saying, a perceptive person will observe many cases of this sort. Meaning, don't only take this example of a donkey with the heavy packages, la, la, la. There are hundreds of circumstances that fall into this category. And the bottom line is we have to think, is this somebody that I really don't like? Or is this somebody like it's again, just going back to the whole thing, but just not nixing the people that don't automatically come onto our A list just because they're not our favorite people. Instead, making it a goal to kind of pour into the people who are on the B or even the C list. Fascinating point. Okay, so he says to sum up, that which a person gives to another is never lost. It is an extension of his own being. He can see a part of himself in the fellow man to whom he has given. This is the attachment between one man and his fellow, to which we give the name love. And that is why we said last week that the root of the word love, hav, the two letters in the root of the word ahava, hav actually means to give. Because if you want to learn how to love, you must learn to give. And just going back now to tie this all together, when we see the reflection of ourselves in the giving. So what's so interesting about that is that, again, the whole point of becoming a giver is to connect to the divine. It is to connect to the source, God, as the ultimate giver. So when we pour into others and we're seeing ourselves in that other person, because we've now given, we've poured in, so now we have that connection, that's connecting to the source of God pouring into us and continuing it and continuing it and continuing it. And I'll just end off with this last idea, and then we can open up for questions. But that last idea is that you can have two identical human beings doing the exact same thing and even giving the exact same thing or the exact same number or the exact same amount of time, and you can have two totally different results, because everything in the power of giving goes here. Everything, right? We're told that it's better to give less money to somebody with a smile on your face than to give a lot of money with a frown or a in your heart. It's more important to show up. Giving is so much about the mind muscle that it is incumbent upon us to be able to work this muscle and to recognize. And sometimes you will find yourself like, okay, I'm working on giving, but you'll feel that it's like you're doing it with your teeth clenched, like your jaw is up tight because it's annoying. So the goal, the ultimate goal, is to be able to give with that extra level of grace, of calmness, of serenity, of knowing like this is exactly what I want to be doing. And it's fascinating to think about that, even with tzedakah. There's many ways to give, right? And there's many forms that we can give. And everybody has to know what their capacity is to give. But even with tzedakah, even with money, you can get two checks. They're both the exact same check for the exact same organization, and one is getting mega reward for it, and one is getting barely any, right? It's the same $1 million check, and they're not getting the same reward because a lot of it has to do with how it was given. And this is a life's worth of work to just constantly use that muscle and feel good about it and know that we're doing the right thing and let that come in a relaxed and a manner that we know that is like, I'm connecting to the divine. When you know you're connecting to the divine, it's very hard to think of that coming from a bad channel. So that's really this week's lesson on giving. I'm going to stop the recording here and take any comments or questions. Any comments or questions, friends?
Devorah,
Yes.
just one comment. When you were